This is Holds to Heavens, a show dedicated to cosmos, to mythos, and to psyche. If you like what you're about to listen to, please consider leaving some stars or a review, or you can always share it with a friend. Welcome to another podcast. This one is called Courting the Muse with Marya Stark. It's late October 2020, less than a week away before the big election, and Mercury and Venus just moved into Libra at the same time, bookending both ends of the sign. Venus at 0, Mercury 29, led, I think, by Persephone between two valleys, hopefully helping us find our center, our balance between extremes in this feral time. For myself, I've made it to Madeira for the winter to reset my ability to be in the UK, and I think I like it here. This land of eternal spring, a big volcanic rock in the middle of the Atlantic. And every morning I wake up and open up the windows and I wonder how high we are. Probably 1,000 feet. And you can just see these beautiful mountains all around with the ocean in the distance. And I'm into it. And I'll be here for 3 months. And so all the shows, I think there'll be 6 or 7 of them that I'll be broadcasting from this place. And so if you've been to Madeira, I'd love to hear your tips. If not, well, hopefully I'm not blowing the place up by mentioning it on the podcast. And so this is the second time Marya's been on the podcast. Last time was in the spring of 2019. And we talked about this album that she just released called Sapphire. And it wasn't released last fall, but it just got released. And it's kind of amazing. Her operatic or even Orphic storytelling, we could call it maybe even spirit folk. But it's out, it's called Sapphire. We talk about it in this conversation. And we talk about courting the Muse. We talk about the Great American Eclipse. We talk about womb wisdom. There's a lot of great subjects that we brush on in this conversation. And if at any point you find yourself laughing with us or getting recharged with your relationship to love and the Muse, consider leaving some stars or a review on the podcast app. If you do so, you can take a screenshot of it, send it to me at cosmonosis@gmail.com, and I'll link you to either the latest class I did on the Mercury cycle that we're now in, or any class of your choosing. So just leave some stars in a review, send it my way, and I'll link you to that gift promptly. Also, if you want to support the podcast and my writing, you can go to patreon.com/AdamSummer. And there's many different pledge levels that you can choose from, all of them with their own gifts, and they compound the higher you go. If you want to learn astrology, if you want to become a professional astrologer, it's the 25 and above levels where you get access to the apprenticeship recordings. And if you want to work with me one-on-one, it's the 50 and above that you need to look at. But it's the way of supporting all that I do, and also, well, supporting yourself too in your own learning. So that's patreon.com/AdamSummer. Now, this happened, I think the last time was the first Edward Tick podcast, but the Zoom just broke off in the middle of our conversation. I mean, that's happened more than once, but what then occurred when I got back on is the audio did not link. So it sounds great on my end for the first half of the show, and then I tried to patch it together, see if you can spot where that happened. I might even mention it when we get there. And then my mic was basically picking up from the computer and not this microphone I'm talking into. It's definitely listenable, but for me, trying to perfect the audio was a little bit annoying. And so I just wanted to mention that. all in all, it's a wonderful conversation. If you want to listen to Marya's album, you can listen to it anywhere where music is found, but to purchase it and to be a part of this Courting the Muse 7-week songwriting course she's doing, go to marya-stark.com and you can learn more about that. So I do hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did, and I will speak with you on the other side of it. Hi, Marya. Welcome back.
Hi, Adam. So great to be here.
Yeah. And you're just telling me that you're in a burn zone. Oh, dear.
I am.
You know, my old home's burning too in Colorado.
Oh, wow. Is that the place that you were living burning, or just the land?
Yeah. Well,
wow.
I don't have a house that I own there or anything, but a piece of property that I was pretty connected to before I kind of set myself adrift and ended up in England. That's burned. Yeah.
Wow.
What's going on from a songstress perspective? Like, what do you see?
Well, there's the world is on fire, and it's been an interesting time because, you know, I live in California. I live in Santa Cruz, California. And the day that the fire started in Bonnie Doon was a day that I was actually going to start looking at houses in Ashland. We ended up driving to Arizona anyway to stay with my family for a couple weeks. And then we came home, and then it was like a week before Sapphire, my new album, released. And so in this preamble, the pre-month before Sapphire, which is all about the power of grief and feeling what I'm going to say is like the unmourned process of humanity and how we carry that in our bodies and our lineage. Like, this album is dedicated to the waters of life, to the waters within, to be running all around the Southwest with all of my like precious instruments and like my hard drives and all of my like favorite costume pieces, kind of wondering where's home because of these crazy fires. Like, it wasn't lost on me, the irony of, wow, I'm living in a very dry place where it's been hotter, it hasn't been raining, and there's this drought quality of energy. And the desire that I have as an artist and as a human on this path of embodiment is for there to be a space for humanity to grieve and to heal, because I think that in some of the patterns that we've seen in our society, my guess is that some of that's sitting on top of undigested trauma. And so it was just as a songstress, as one who's kind of playing in the myth of what are these images of the dream trying to share with us about our evolutionary process, to see this, like, to be guided for 4 years on this path of like holding this prayer around water and grief and the return of some sort of inner peace through that, and to be having a living experience when trying to birth out of like running around, not knowing where I'm going to live, everything's on fire. It's a beautiful paradox. And I'm feeling like it's like the cosmic wink, like the cosmos are winking. They're like, yep, this is part of the territory of birthing this particular prayer through your own body, so you can kind of reckon with where you're existing within that on a meta scale and on like a much grander picture than just your own personal feelings about things.
That's the high art, your dedication there. Are you familiar with Martine's Smell of Rain on Dust?
I am. You know, it's a trip because I actually wrote a song. I grew up in Arizona, in Phoenix, and there was always these monsoons. And for many years in my life, after living away from monsoons that would come at the end of the summers, I really wanted to write a song about the ecstasy of the rain and the ecstasy of the thunderstorm. And I ended up writing song Blood of the Stone, which is on Sapphire, after doing the research on petrichor and like what is that thing that makes us ecstatic, why is that part of our brain evolution to feel bliss when we smell the rains coming. And then I wrote that song, and about a month later someone was like, oh, you should read this book, The Smell of Rain on Dust. Or I like walked into a bookstore and I saw The Smell of Rain on Dust, and it was like kind of this mythic moment of like, I just wrote this song and now here's Martine Porcella and I've heard about this guy. And I read his book on grief, and it was just this, it was like a beautiful affirmation to hear his poetry about that and his knowingness about that has informed how I've carried that song since.
Oh, that's a good answer. Yeah, that's a powerful one. When I first read it, I had the thought at the end of it as, I need 108 copies of this book to just send to people throughout life when they hit those Pluto square Pluto moments or Saturn return moments. It's like, hey, what's your address? I want to send you something.
It's definitely one of those top books. Because it's such. There hasn't been an articulation of grief that has been so encompassing of the ages and of what the real impact is on the people as that book. And my favorite part of that book is where he like trains you if like you really need to grieve someone dying or like a big loss, like take your friend to the water and just have them not like interact with you, but like take the bottle of tequila, which is going to help you like pour the tears out and just like wail and scream and like curse and like mourn and let it all out wildly to the ocean, and do it for no longer than 3 days, because after 3 days you have to cut yourself off and your friend's there to make sure you don't drown.
Yep. Just allow it to happen. I remember these thoughts, and like our tears make the ocean salty. That one stuck with me, and just the grief and praise being the same coin. It's important.
Absolutely.
Like, forgetting to praise in all of this, and just the fact that we're still here after 8 months of a bit of a chapter in the 6th layer of hell. I mean, we all deserve a little praise. And, to start it off with you, it's like, my goodness, Marya, I'm so happy that Sapphire is finally out, because we talked about it last time. And it's very obvious you spent a lot of energy and time and love on this project. It's clear, right? And I can't even imagine what it's like to finally get it out. And so maybe tell us a story about that. Something magical.
Well, it's so magical to, I mean, it's definitely for me a project that has brought together many kind of doorway, like let's say you're on a creative adventure and you're exploring all the rooms in the house of creativity, and in each room you discover a new tool, and you build an altar to the muse in that room, and then you take that tool and that experience into another room, and you like move through all of these doors, and each project's a little different because you're discovering a new tool. Sapphire for me was this like moment of bringing all of the tools into the great room of the house, and saying, okay, we figured out this in that room, we figured out this other thing in the other room. What can we make with all this stuff, and what more do we need? And I feel like it was that calling of what more can I create that I haven't known myself to create, but I feel like has been something inside of me that has wanted to come out in terms of world building and bridging into the things that I really love and have been hunting and have been like being pulled out of me by this curiosity to continue to court her inspiration. And so it's been really, I've been experiencing this chapter of birthing her as like I'm in the 4th trimester, like I'm in the afterbirth period. It's just been a little over a month since she came out. And originally we were going to release her in May. And then like March came along and was like, whoa, Snapdragon, we're not doing anything in May. I was like, oh, maybe June. And then I was like, I'm not going to be ready by June. And then, of course, like revolution broke through the country and the world. And it's just been such a wild time to like, there was a lot of letting go and grieving. I was so excited to go on tour and like do a big theater production of this project that was part of the things that got discovered in the different rooms. So like, we're going to do it in this particular way. And so I think birthing something and continuing that we've put so much time into, even though the world kind of went into like the snow globe of the whole world got shook, and we're still all trying to find each other through the blizzard and like see what timelines are going to arise as everything has been tossed together, to still feel like this quality of energy with Sapphire that's just like, yeah, duh, like this is why we wanted to do this particular project at this particular time. It almost felt like this great test of my soul to like stay committed to creativity in the midst of total chaos, and to stay committed to the covenant of standing at the threshold of dreaming and imagination to continue to build, even as the realms that we have come to understand or define us, like they're really being ripped away. And so we're all in this sort of ego dissolution. I'm like, wow, who am I to as a steward of creativity, even as everything I've known is falling away? And so when it finally got clear, I was like, okay, I'm going to release in September, because Sapphire is the birthstone for September, and it's going to be the new moon in Virgo. And I had all this like magical mythos around like, yeah, Sapphire is the stone on the breastplate of the priestess. It's perfect for Virgo, and I'm going to just have this birth in Sapphire. And so felt really good about that. And then of course, 3 weeks before she got born, I was like running for my life from my home in Santa Cruz and being with my grandmother who passed away in those 2 weeks too. And, and it's been this like, yeah, I mean, it's beautiful, right? Like she lived a long life, and it was this sort of passing of the baton of her life as I'm coming to birth this light frequency, or this like creative dream, and so it does feel mythically aligned. There's been this sort of way that I've been experiencing Sapphire as somehow like my future having been calling to me through the veils since like 2016. And so to sort of be in the space where like I'm arriving and birthing into what that future, what part of me was like, oh yeah, this is my future self. I can totally feel and see now, like why, if that was a true thing, like if we could really bend time that way, why myself now as I am would call to myself in 2016 to prepare her for what has arrived in this era. So I am having very mystical experiences of like past and future self sort of in counsel with each other to stay the course of what we came here to do.
You just went straight into time travel and the bending of space. Okay, I love this. Because that's a thing. I think it is experience of consciousness, what you described. And one of the most interesting things about studying both story and astrology is how they work in Kairos, or like a time out of time. And the imagination is funny like this. And one of the ways that I've learned, and this is, I think, going to tie into our last conversation, because there's these elemental years that Mercury goes through. Are you familiar with this concept, how it moves through the elements?
A little bit, but I'd love, sure.
Yeah, it's a pretty basic concept that there's these stretches of time where every Mercury retrograde or cycle will be in the same element, like it'll station in the same element. And so since you and I talked last, which was I think April of last year, it was right after Mercury. I think it was the first of the Mercury retrogrades, might have been the second in water. That was the Pisces one. And for you, that was the fifth house, right, in your own chart. And it was also kind of the beginning. You were already working on this project, right? But it was still like the beginning momentum of the project, wasn't it?
It was like very mid.
Okay.
It was like we were like deep. We had already been at it. April of last year, we were like 3 months or 4 months away from finishing the music for it.
I remember, yeah, because you said it was going to come out in the fall.
Yeah. And then
Yes.
we're like, no, it's not. We like finish in August, and I'm like, I need to sit with this and see what wants to happen. It just took, yeah.
And work with the water.
Totally.
And I think the reason why I want to share this is because the next one was in July. That was Cancer, your sun, Mars, ruler of your chart. And then last fall, exactly a year ago, it was in Scorpio. And then it was Pisces again at the beginning of the pandemic. And then it was Cancer again at the beginning of this summer, well, like July, beginning of. And then now, tomorrow is the last of the water cycles with the Mercury harmonic cycle sense, and it's in Scorpio, running your ascendant. And with everything that you've said about working with the waters and grief, the sapphire, the color, the feeling of the album, I've listened to it a couple times. It kind of fits with this concept of the elemental year a bit. And one of the things that we ended up talking about last time is how your Mercury is conjunct your midheaven and how perfect that is for storyteller, stellar vocalist, performance art, like everything you are and how you are presenting yourself to the world. It's just so perfect, right? And this is the final of the elemental year. And it's like, voila.
For the water. So how long were these elemental Mercury retrograde cycles going on, like this year and last year?
Well, they all happen in the respective water signs, right? And so like every 3 to 4 months, it will just basically go, is it counterclockwise? Yeah, throughout the zodiac. And what comes next, like in the new year, is going to be air, and it will be that way for over a year.
For a couple years. Or just 1 year. Okay.
It's weird with Mercury time because there's a little bit of overlap. Like this particular one, like it goes all the way back into Libra, stations direct. But the cycle, the way I track it, will start pretty much right on top of your Pluto, Marya. It's at
That's
2
really
degrees.
funny because I'm like totally going towards some very more air projects instead of water.
And what does that what does that mean? Because that's what we're moving into after this one.
Well, like one of the projects I'm working on right now, I'm making an album, and it's called, I'm going to tell the name of it. No, I'm going to hold the name because you can't tell all the secrets right away. But I will say that the name of the album and like kind of the energy of the album is this sort of experience of being suspended in air. And not all the songs are of that concept, but there is a little bit of that playing of like, it's playful. There's an air magic to what's happening right now. So I think that that's really fun.
That works. It does. It's something that's, like the very nature of our god Hermes. It's slippery. It's hard to pin down and find language for it. But the more and more you track these cycles, it's stunning. Both by, in the sky and by progression. And I just add that because of this water focus. And even like the art on the album, like it's glacial. Isn't it? And so
it was the glacial. Well, that was the vision. That was like, there was this sapphire sphere that was being held in the glacier. The devas were like holding it for the time when humanity would need to remember the most, and then they would start to thaw, the glaciers would, to release this sapphire energy into the waters of life so that it could remind people about the original songs of water that have been being held for thousands of years for us.
It's my favorite metaphor for Scorpio, or analogy. Right? It's a good one. It's fixed water. And there's deep wisdom in that, of course, with our ecological situation too. And are you familiar with, oh goodness, what's her name? It starts with a Z. Zoria Foreman? Have you ever seen her paintings? She just paints glaciers. Huge paintings of glaciers. And they're so incredible. And I forget how I discovered her, but I was just kind of artists like that have that patience for insane detail and just dedicate like that. I don't know. I bow down because I don't have that kind of focus with anything that I do. So it's an awe moment for me. And yeah, she's got the glacial art thing down. And the story that you just referenced, I think, is it the one that relates to the Great American Eclipse? Is that what you had, the vision, or is this a different one?
Well, it's funny that you bring up the Great American Eclipse, because the vision came about a year before, or maybe like it was like November or January before, but it happened a little bit before, like at the very end of 2016, and then I was writing about it. I was like, what is this sort of mystical, like glacier thawing the frozen heart, the relationship between our own frozen emotionalness and then like the earth sort of releasing the water so we could remember to release the waters, and like kind of I was starting to muse on these like original songs of planet Earth. Like, what were the songs that the nature was singing before humans started to distort the music through fear, and through this like fear of deprivation, which is imbalance of water, right? Like fear is related to the kidneys, is related to the water, is related to, is there going to be enough? And I think that was one part of some of the power imbalance that started happening, where we started to like exercise our own will and power over each other in order to have more. And there's like other imbalances that are happening, but there's something in there around the water system. So that I just started musing on that in 2016, but 2017 was so cool. And the Great American Eclipse was at the peak of sort of like where some of this emotional energy was coming, like rocking inside of me. And that was in the middle of my Pluto Sun transit, right? Like, so Pluto is like exactly opposing my sun during the Great American Eclipse. And that I remember being there. We were at the eclipse gathering in Oregon, and I remember looking in the sky and just like hearing all of these folks howl in the middle of the desert, and at this thing that in the sky looked like the sapphire that I had been carrying around for the year, because it looked like this dragon egg that was like blue and red, and like it was glowing, and it just contained this, for me in my mind at the time, I was just like, whoa, it's like pregnant with this whole shift. And I love that you brought that up. So that was like the peak of my processor in it. And then I started recording Sapphire shortly after that. I see.
A dragon egg. I don't know why that's ever come out of my mouth, because I think about them as dragon holes, Marya. Like those eclipse portals, as you know, are quite powerful. Yeah, like to see it as an egg, it's incredible, because I do think they have a lifespan, and according to some folks, we're still in that lifespan at the moment.
I feel it.
Yeah,
I feel it.
Yeah, and so for you, like in seeing this red-blue egg on the eclipse, and shortly after was the beginning of this project that now has a bit of a conclusion to it. At least the album is out. Performances haven't happened yet. And I want to get to that, by the way, the torture of being an artist and not being able to perform, because I feel for you. Of how you see it still living. How do you see the kind of theme of late August 2017, when the Great American Eclipse was connected to this moment that we're in?
Well, for me as a creator, it was that eclipse was an initiatory gateway into accessing more of my power, and also like my true desire and will. And it was.
And this is where Zoom decided to stop working, and the conversation picks up right about now.
Baby, I was talking about like the existential question of, are we as a human species still building a world that generations after us are going to be able to survive in? And I think this existential complexity of kind of having a lot of information that is confirming to a narrative that might not be the case is very intense, especially when we're seeing all of our social systems shut down. There's a lot of complexity around finances for people. There's a lot of fear being activated. There's a lot of all kinds of things happening. And then there's still this drive of the dreamer, the Imagineer, like what, the one in me that knows that like not all the cards are on the table and the game isn't over yet. And like, we're still evolving as a species and like not really wanting to opt into any of the inevitable death sentences that some of the storytellers are sharing, and what to do when we're faced with so much madness. And I think in that way, the Great American Eclipse is that for me was contained this experience of that dilemma of like, do I prepare to live out the rest of my life as a person who is creating just for my own pleasure and of evolution, or am I a person who's stewarding a vision of people staying on this planet for 1,000 more years to come? And like, how would I create in that way? And is there a difference? And yeah.
Heart-provoking answer. I like this. The American Eclipse, the name, it still doesn't feel right in my mouth. The Great American Eclipse was on Regulus, late Leo. And I find that interesting because it's the invitation, that area of the sky, to be a good king or queen, because it is the royal star of Persia, the heart of the lion. And it also has the great shadow to it. Like the Red King, or Trump, has his ascendant there. Like Mars ascendant right there. And so the Great American Eclipse was on that for him. And he's been a wonderful example of what not to do when you're given that position. And for us, and you're so familiar with Chinese medicine, right? Like everything, all the spirits, all the organs, the whole narrative of health and holistic vibration is all protecting the heart and the emperor or the king. And so that's kind of been my pivot around that since the beginning of like, well, what does that mean for all of us, right? To find radiant contentment, to know our art, to be connected to the muse, despite things seemingly spinning out of control. Like, how do you stay in the ground state and keep creating? And that's been my main practice really since then, but of course specifically since lockdown. Like, how can I keep on doing this and not fall into the darkness of the conspiracies and looking at transits and trying to make predictions about when it will end, of what's going to happen because of it, and actually stay in it, and basically in the waters, and just like keep diving into those dark glacial waters and coming back with some sort of gift from a seal, something in there.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, we've been walking with this sort of naming of the door as like how to be a bard in the bardo. How to be a bard in the bardo. How to be a weaver of image of possibility and creative, like moving creative life force energy in the face of total uncertainty. And to even go a step further, that like the images that are occurring on the screen are very complex and are demonstrating images out of a horror movie or out of like many realms of suffering. How it's really like reinforced some of my practices, like, wow, how do I really sit at the center and be one who fight's not the right word, but who is in response to the images arising on the scene with the things that I want to see. And there's this, it's like a very simple thing. It's like, oh, build the thing that you want or create what you want, and don't let the apparent limitations stop that. Like, how can we use apparent limitation rather than as a reason to stop creating, but rather as like a gym to grow stronger? So has been this muscle building, I think, of determination to stay in it.
Bravo. Well, you've obviously done it. And I mean, NPR was watching. Like, they had you on their show yesterday. Like, that's a national broadcast of what you're speaking about and singing about, isn't it?
I mean, it was cool to get to go on. That was one of the questions that John asked me. It was like, well, how do you stay so positive in these times when they're so weird? And I was like, I have to, because I sealed a deal with the angels, or like I made the covenant to be a steward of imagination and of dreaming. And I think that is part of the medicine of that. It's like not even staying positive. It's like, it's just staying in the possibility.
You think they'll keep that part in?
I hope so. If they don't, it's here, because you're not going to cut it out.
I will not cut that part out. I'll try to clean up the internet issue. That's about it.
Okay, great. We'll see if they keep the part where I talk about the womb mysteries.
Oh, I'm actually interested in womb mysteries a bit. Tell us a little bit about womb mysteries and how they relate to Cancer.
Oh my gosh, how do they relate to
anything
Cancer,
astrological?
Anything astrological. Okay.
Or not. Like, I mean, this is just
anything and all
anymore. Just give it to us.
Okay, well, the things that I, of course, am not going to say on national NPR. I mean, he's hey, ask me a womb wisdom. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to just talk about womb wisdom right now on national radio. That's cool. But the thing that I'll share with you here in the chambers of the mystical astrological portal is we're talking about Persephone, because I did this photo shoot yesterday about Persephone, because I'm in Ashland right now, and a woman who lives here had lost her house in the fire and wanted to do a photo shoot to sort of commemorate the experience. So I got called in to embody Persephone, who we know goes into the underworld with Hades and like emerges from Hades town and these like charnel grounds of the realms of everything being burnt down, and like she's emerging with the pomegranate, just like the knowledge of what was uncovered down below. And from a womb mystery perspective, one of the reasons I love the Persephone myth is this, or one of the metaphors that was shared with me that I love is that the pomegranate seeds represent the drops of blood that the women experience when they're in their cycle. And that so every month women are going into the underworld and experiencing death and experiencing that which gets to be burned away, and then return with a new fortification, new insight, new breath, and then spring returns, and then they're like in activity, and then like the summer's glorious, and they're harvesting, and they're in ovulation. They're like, oh my God, it's magic. And the fall comes again. They're like, oh shit, it's going down, and then like back into the underworld. And so what I love about the womb, similarly to the moon, is that there's these embodied song. This is an embodied mythic song. And what I think is really fun about women's bodies and like biological bodies that have this pattern is that they're going through these archetypal transformations month after month after month, and then through a lifetime even they go through a wider cycle of that, right? Like, so we're born and then we come into menses and we like have the first chat, like this like, whoa, I'm an adult now, or I'm like, I can make babies. And then like in the summer of like birthing and going through these cycles, and then we go into a fall of our lives and like hold the blood and go into like deep wisdom until we prepare for death. So it's these mini cycles, the lunar cycles, that then expand over a whole lifetime to encapsulate that same magic, but in a much larger ritual and rite of passage. And I just think it's so beautiful, especially because we start leading around 11 to 14, and there's a lot of transits that are happening right there. You get your like first Jupiter return, you're getting like a Saturn opposition. There's these like things that are happening in that first transition, and can look all over the place, and a lot of women stop bleeding when they're in their Uranus opposition or in their Chiron return, and they're like kind of going through these other like radical shifts, and then they're like being blasted into this other chapter of their lives to sort of harvest the wisdom of like and reflection of like, wow, what were all those cycles about? You know, what did I learn about seeing myself go through all of these faces of the goddess over and over and over again?
Thank you for that. And I'm glad you bring up that last part, because that's where my mind was kind of spinning as you were describing that. Have you read anything on it? Like what astrological symbols relate to the journey of a woman? Like, because
No.
Jupiter cycle seems to match it quite well. The first return, right? Puberty and that menses begins. 24 is a bit of a peak, right? 36, the beginning of, well, you're about to be there, right? Like it's the full maturation of your being. And also some poets would say when a woman is the most beautiful, between 36 and 40. And then the next Jupiter returns 48, which is in that window you just described.
Oh, cool. I love that. Jupiter. And it does feel very Jupiterian. There's something about the expansion and movement through Jupiter. I love that. I want to sit with that more.
Yeah, and how Jupiter governs the pituitary as well, and just regulates a lot of hormonal dances in the body.
Awesome.
That's
super fun. We were talking about Jupiter because I'm about to go through a bunch of Jupiter transits at the beginning of next year, and I feel it. I'm like, oh man, if I'm getting to like birth Sapphire and then move into these like Jupiter transits, I can't wait.
Yes, it's true. I think for a lot of well, just the solstice this year is amazing because, well, always the winter solstice or the summer solstice are those great pivots, but the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is happening that day. And it's a significant one on a bigger scale. Like we were talking about the Mercury elemental years. Well, Jupiter and Saturn have these 200 plus year stretches where all their conjunctions every 20 years are in the same element. So it's been Earth for around 200 years leading up to this winter solstice. And then we move into 200 years of air.
Wow.
Right? And you think of that, you're like, oh, I'm working on the Air album, but 200 years, Marya. Where are we going from here? And I see that, like that transition with a lot of what wisdom you've been sharing about the waters, and then knowing that there's an elemental pivot that's happening at the end of this year. And I don't think anything's going to shift on a dime. No magic box is just going to appear and float out of Uluru or anything like this that folks are talking about. I'm not subscribing to that. But it's interesting that there is a lot of wisdom traditions and indigenous people talking about this year and how it does match up with the Jupiter-Saturn thing and then the Mercury elemental year and that. And so what does that represent as an invitation moving forward for us? Can we learn how to communicate better? I think so. I
hope so.
Because this whole social media thing has definitely devolved in a serious way for a lot of folks. Can we learn how to think better? Because I think that the machines, the exegesis of our thought forms have also crippled that a little bit. And can we have better communities or, be feeling like we have tribe? These are big air questions. Gemini and Aquarius, like, can we experience that? Of course we can. It's happening already, but like in a more grand scale. Can we be really interested in those things? And make it another 1,000 years. We'll be quite good at it by then.
Maybe so. May the transition into the age of Aquarius bring, it's that fun thing too. It's like, well, if we've been in this like water, and then we're like going into like, a 200-year air cycle, and then like switching to the age of Aquarius, like what does the water bear now? It's like if that's mythic, like, okay, well, we have the water. Where does it get born? What does the bearing of it mean? Yeah. As like an intellect, as an air science, like, oh, now do we know? Are we becoming more emotionally intelligent? Now do we know how to wield water? Not wield it, but are we creating good banks for it?
Yeah, like clean enough to drink. Can we see ourselves in it?
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah,
We're going to find out in a little bit, one way or another.
Learn to swim. Learn to swim. Learn to swim. You got the reference, didn't you? Oh man, that's so fun. I say, I'm really curious about. What song is it on your album, Marya? I was listening to it today when we were driving. The Echoes song. Right? I like that one. I don't have a favorite yet, but I do like that one. And just like the holding on to the night refrain in it. You want to go into that for me, for us? Because I think it's a great image. And what is that? Is it your love of stargazing, or is it something else that we're kind of doing?
I mean, Echo, gosh, I wrote that. I started writing that song. I was on like a week-long creative retreat. And then it was this sort of like story that came out almost like from a dream, like of a past life or a future life. And it was this quality of energy. I've been exploring a lot, like what is the beloved? What is the beloved as the divine? What is God as the twin flame? You know, what is the muse as the oracle sage? Like how are they all hanging out in court as aspects of self and our own maturation and evolution and embodiment? And that song was a really fun exploration of kind of the more mythic side of the story, where we get to just come into communion with another being and exchange eros and delight and sensuality and merge with God. And how does that play into, I think there's these just really funny stories that we're exploring around love. We always have been. Humans are obsessed with it. We're completely infatuated with infatuation, and we hate it at the same time, and we can't live without it. And we have some relationship to it, or we're dead to it. You know, there's some quality of life force energy that we're in relationship to this thing called love, and it's love of myself, it's love of another, it's love of all beings, and there's somehow this interplay of growth and learning that happens. And so with Echo, you know, the story that I was imagining was that these two lovers were catching a vision from another time on planet Earth, and they were like, man, this is a shit show. We got to go there and and love each other so much as to eradicate all this suffering. And so this beautiful tantric prayer and this pledge of incarnating to the realm and finding each other and singing. And I imagine as the lovers like singing through the veils to each other through lifetime to find each other on Earth. And so when I think about the Echo, it's like, oh, we're holding tight to the night that we made that pledge. We're holding tight to the echo of the remembrance of such a powerful prayer of love. We're holding that tight. And the funny thing is that like when we hold, you know, if we're holding too tightly to love, we don't experience it, you know. And so there's also this paradox of grief of like, wow, if we hold tight to love, it can't transform us. If we're holding it in a way that we become contracted and we don't actually get to experience the return of our own divinity. And so there's this beautiful, perplexing thing that happens, I think, with us, like, especially in the community of like searching for the one. I'm searching for the beloved. I'm searching for this, like the other half of my song so that we can finally return to the truth that we know about life, which is that it's a beautiful, glorious, compassionate, wise, harmonious existence. And like, yeah, we're incarnated into a realm of deep suffering, and we're trying to like remember and listen for the edge of the echo of something we know that is beyond the suffering.
Yes, to all of that.
And we're like experimenting and trying to find it with each other. And I doing these awkward tango dances, and it's sloppy but beautiful and perfectly human.
Perfectly human. And of course, I mean, we have this search. It's going on eternally. And the question gets posed to me very often, being an astrologer. What's your answer to that? For anyone that's seeking for the beloved, like, what is your advice to someone that's in that position where they're just longing and they don't see the currency and the value to their longing yet? What's your advice?
I mean, I think that was another thing that was really part of a Great American Eclipse for me, was really getting in touch with longing as an act, as an experience of being alive. And I think that, we come back to like grief and praise here. There is something there's like that Rumi poem where someone comes to the stage and is like, oh, I have this longing, and what do I do? And the sage is like, your longing is the dog howling for the master. Like, and it's such a beautiful poem. My friend posed it to me when we were discussing this howling, and that's really what it is for me. It's like, we don't want the thing we want the feeling of wanting, because as soon as we get what we want something else. And it can be a curse if we don't embrace that the desire is this like powerful force of life that is the spark, and it's the magic and curiosity, and we become too imbalanced in our strategies to like capture it. It's like, are we going to try and capture the butterfly? Are we trying to capture the lightning bug in a jar and then watch it die? It's this thing. It's like this uncapturable thing. It's like the muse, but if there's an open surrender to it, then we become it. It's like this embodiment of it. And I think to engage with longing, I mean, I feel like that's like it's connected to the waters too. It's connected to the kidneys. It's connected to the heart. It's the ache for the communion. And I see it as a part of the spiritual path. I think it's part of the path of understanding self in terms of others, and understanding self in terms of divine that's beyond anything that can be reflected to us and others. And aren't we so lucky that we get to incarnate into form where we get to dance with others who are on the same quest? And I think it's one of those things that only matured can really satiate, because I feel or like it breaks our heart over and over again, the longing, the desire, the yearning for magic, or the yearning for the beloved. And my experience of having explored this for 20 years or more is that it just keeps asking me to live with a broken, open heart that is stabilizing in as much awe as I can possibly stand.
I really hope NPR leaves your answers in, because you were answering like this last night, weren't you?
Maybe, we'll see.
They're just great answers.
It's like waxing poetic.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's great. And there was like a simmer to something you said. It was just like, that. And it is. It's like that dog howling at the moon and the wanting. It's like, that's such a unique feeling, and it does keep people holding tight to the night. Right? Like, it pulls people out. It pulls people to shows. It pulls people to parties and gatherings. It pulls people out because they're constantly seeking that. But what's seeking them is, you are seeking it, it is seeking you. That's what I wanted to say. And there's just like, how do you keep that alive and just fall in love with the fact that like the longing is valuable. It doesn't feel great with certain translations, or if you compare yourself to others, but there is validity to it, and it's of course always going to be seen in the chart, but like to really dig into it and marinate in that feeling, I think that is the currency for sure.
And I think there's something about longing, it's got wisdom. There's wisdom to it if we're not there's wisdom of knowing ourselves as one who wants something, and there's wisdom in knowing as ourselves as one who can hold and be with an experience that we can't control. And that, like, if we're trying, and that it's like it both serves us to guide us towards potentially becoming more of who we're meant to become. But it's not going to happen through us trying to control the feeling of it.
Never.
And what we want is going to evolve before our eyes as we evolve, but the feeling never like goes away. It gets satiated for a time, maybe if you're lucky. and maybe there are those out there who don't have who are content, and they don't have that longing, and I want to meet some more of those people, like truly content people, and and ask them what are you content with your longing? Like, what happened? What's the bridge there? Because maybe like maybe I'm in a phase of just fury with the muse where she's just stirring the longing. So I'll keep hunting those parts of myself.
And this is something you're teaching too, isn't it? Courting the muse.
Totally, I'm teaching Courting the Muse. It's going to be a 7-week songwriting class, which starts November 3rd, which I'm super excited about, where I'm going to talk about some of the songs from Sapphire. We're going to actually unpack the songwriting process and like look at song structure, but we're going to be sitting with the muse as these parts of ourselves that call us out and that want to be known and danced with, and they want to pull us into different rooms of our imagination and give us gifts of tools and skills with ourselves. So, which I consider kind of like a process of soul evolution and crafting with our process of embodiment. And so we're going to be doing that for 7 weeks together. We start on Election Day in the U.S., which is a great time to, I think, just take the energy of the last chapter right into fall. We're starting right around Samhain, and just take it into the second half of fall and prepare for this beautiful transition at the solstice, and let creative process reveal to us more of ourselves.
Yes, please. That's also the day Mercury stations direct.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. We're going to communicate some things about some stuff.
The day goes direct and a journey like that begins. I think that, for anyone listening that's called to take songwriting, and I mean, you'll be doing some vocal exercises and training.
We'll be singing a little bit. We'll be doing songwriting in the class. We'll be going through creative process and really like taking creativity as a path of personal development. Because I think when as we're talking about like, wow, what does it take to commit to being a creative, an Imagineer, and a one who's at the threshold of the worlds that want to become? What does it take to stand guard there and like have resolve, and who are we there, and who do we get to know ourselves as, and what parts of ourselves would resist that, and how can they come and be part of it as well? And so, we're going to get into creative process and magic and songwriting and write songs together and go on some really fun muse adventures.
Everyone, all levels, and able to...
Everyone, all levels.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
What song, Marya, do you think I should use at the end of this show here?
I think you should use Echo, since we talked about it.
Okay. I was thinking Rose Lineage just because you have Benji on there. I love his music.
We can do Rose Lineage because then we'll bring in the womb wisdom. And Rose Lineage, honestly, this whole process of making this album, and I feel like making Lineage, and also working in Scarlet Crow and bringing those albums, I feel like Rose Lineage was the song I was trying to find through the whole process. Like if I was trying to find a song or like an expression of an aspect of me, and like healing the womb and moving through like the dark cycles of the injured feminine, and working through the stages of rites of passage and the beauty of all of that, the Rose Lineage arose as this gift of like, here it is. This is what was calling you for all of those years. So yeah, we can end with that one.
Okay. You're not hard to convince, but I just felt it too, in that just Benji in the background. It's such a great space, like with the tablas and everything like that, but also with your voice. It seems like the absolute full flowering of your voice as well. Like there's such range and power to your voice, and that you can feel that very clearly in the final song of the album. So, all right, I got permission to use that one then?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. What are some final words? I don't want to abruptly do this, but it is late for me and I'm flying.
Oh yeah, we're doing this. Well, what I will say is that the bad news is we don't know what the fuck is happening. The good news is we don't know what's happening. Yes. And regardless of how we frame the news, creativity is always an option. And so no matter which timeline we're on, my belief is that there's always hanging out in the creative process is going to be of benefit. And so I'm excited to continue stewarding that, and I hope that this talk was inspiring for those listening about activating and committing and staying with those voices in you that feel like, hey, maybe there's something that is mine to do to engage the dream in a way that only I can do.
And what do you say to folks that say that they're not creative?
I say, who told you that?
My dad.
Yeah, I say, how long have you been telling yourself that story? And I say, are there any other voices inside of you that have something other than that to say? Mm-hmm. Are there any quieter voices that would say, hey, that's not true?
And definitions of creativity, I think, are helpful as well. Like, would you not agree that we're all creative beings? It just
100%. I think creativity is one of the things that makes us human.
Yeah.
I think it is a profound human quality. It's our birthright. And so those who don't define themselves as creative, I counter with, it sounds like you haven't had a lot of space to explore this part of your humanity.
And so here's an invitation to court the Muse, my friend.
Yeah.
My new friend. That's good. That's good. Well, Marya, always a pleasure. I'm happy for you.
Thank you so much.
And when that show goes live on the NPR, send me a link. I'll share it. I'll put it on the website as well. So
I appreciate it. I'm excited. That's going to be fun. And I'm excited for this show. This talk was really juicy. So I'm excited to share this one.
A lot of excitement. Oh, dear.
Yay.
Well, the cycle, again, begins tomorrow. So
Word.
Prayers.
Awesome.
Prayers. All right, Marya, beautiful. Thank you
Beautiful love.
again for coming.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me. And until next time.
Alrighty.
All right. Bye.
Well, I hope you liked that one. Hopefully Marya's advice around finding love was helpful, that the ripples from the Great American Eclipse can be seen by you as well, and that if you are in that grip of longing, hopefully you can see the currency of it after listening to us talk about it. Again, if you want to listen to her album, go to marya-stark.com. And there's also information on there about her 7-week songwriting course called Courting the Muse. It starts on November 3rd, the day Mercury stations direct. There's a wonderful video as well. You can, if you're listening to this on my website, I linked it on there, where you can listen to the album but also see these great visuals while listening. So I recommend doing it that way if you're a visual person. And yeah, thank you again, Marya, for coming on. It's always a pleasure talking with you. And yeah, just some final bits of news before we listen to that Rose Lineage song. So this podcast is brought to you by Solar Fire. And if you use promo code SOMA, you get 15% off of the program. If you're a serious astrology student and you don't have it yet, you probably should get it. It's very helpful. And I've done this 2-hour class on how to get the most out of Solar Fire that you automatically get when you purchase it with the promo code. And so if you send me proof of that after purchasing it, I will link you promptly to that solar fire class. Also, if you do leave some stars in a review, if you enjoyed this and there was something in it that just lit you up, send me a screenshot and I'll link you to the Mercury class or anyone of your choosing. And if you want to support this podcast and my writing, patreon.com/Adam Summer. And also, I guess this is important to mention too, is that you don't necessarily need to be a patron to get access to the apprenticeship recordings. You can just purchase them outright on my website now at holstoheavens.com. So if you just want all of the recordings at once and to learn at your own pace, you can purchase them there at holstoheavens.com. And so the song Rose Lineage, it's with Scarlet Crow and Benji Wertheimer. I don't know if I pronounced Benji's last name right. Honestly, his first name either, but I listen to his music often. There's this album, One River, that I really enjoy. And it's the three of them making this beautiful music about the Rose lineage. And so I hope you enjoy it. And thank you for joining me once again for the podcast. And I will be speaking with you next with the great Nick Campion, talking about the history of astrology and also the reprint of mundane astrology that's coming out very soon. And so until then, be well, be kind, eudaimonia, and I will talk with you soon.
and from my beauty I am ground into the rosary beam. Come and sing your prayers over me. Come sing your prayers over me. A rose lineage of the grandmothers, lineage of the velvet rose, lineage of the crimson waters, lineage of the rose, lineage of the Magdalene daughters, lineage of the scarlet coats, lineage of the visions they brought her back to the heart. A rose blooms when she is ready. When she is ready, and not a moment too soon.